Andrew, this is about the nations back in the 1920s. Around the green border is like what each problems were, such as the Red Scare, the immigration restrictions, sorrow, Yankees case, and the Black migration. For the image, it's about the Red Scare, such as like when the communists came and everybody was people were scared into thinking it was evil, and it still is today, as some consider it. But for the traditional and modern act, we are still some of the nations are some of the we are still reliant on some part from the Red Scare, but we're not more. We're still like against the communists, but we turn into an independent nation, and we are so connected by the immigration restrictions, such as we are restricting some of the countries on the other side of the world. That's still going on today, but yes.
The four main parts of the business and economy section of the 1920s were Henry Ford and the automobile, farmers' problems, buying on credit, and consumerism. Around the border are words that represent buying on credit. For example, buy now, pay later was a common phrase used to talk about the prices that consumers would originally pay before making monthly payments. Phonographs, washing machines, and vacuum cleaners were some examples that were bought of products that were bought on credit. For automobiles, the traditional perspective, they liked a slower lifestyle because they could walk to locations. They also favored a greater social connection because more socializing could occur in communities without automobiles and more people would be met. However, the modern perspective were interested in the lifestyle changes that the automobiles brought. Automobiles brought more freedom, infrastructure, vacations, restaurants, and industries such as gasoline, steel, gas, rubber, wood, and asphalt. There were also larger suburbs because people could live farther from their job by driving to work. Down here is Henry Ford. He was known as a leading businessman because of the way he transformed business. The Detroit River was where he got all of his products from to make the automobile. This picture is a picture of the Ford Model T created by Henry Ford. It was the first affordable car for the middle-class citizens. Assembly lines were used to construct the car, and they were mass-produced. It caused industry growth in all different industries. For consumerism, the traditional perspective favored a minimalist lifestyle without as many goods. The traditional people like to spend more time with people rather than products, which also considers their favor of a social life. They also liked a stable economy of paying the full price up front rather than making a small down payment. However, for the modern perspective, people liked new products. They favored technological advances and innovative ideas. They liked efficiency and more products for short satisfaction. Finally, the farmers' problems in the 1920s compared to today. In the 1920s, farmers had to face an economic depression. This depression was a surplus to falling prices. The machinery was expensive, there was no government aid, and there was mortgage foreclosure, so farmers lost land. Today, there is less available land, the land prices are more expensive, the government mandates environmental concerns, there are new technologies that farmers must keep up with, and they also must face climate change.
With science and technology, there are two, again, big points. The Scopes monkey trial and the radio. The radio was mostly just about modernists believe that the spread of the jazz age and entertainment through music or comedy or just news in general could be spread through the radio. And traditionalists appreciated the news part, but they really didn't think that people of color or anyone that wasn't a white person should belong on the radio and spout anything that had to do with anything with America. In the Scopes Monkey trial, the main verdict was traditionalists felt threatened that their religion was being tested. Modernists believed that now they had a chance to use science and their own intellect to confirm their ways of life instead of needing to prove themselves to the judgment of society. With the Scopes Monkey trial, the main question was, should we trust this new science or should we continue with our blind faith in religion? And a good comparison to that would be gun control laws. The question is, should we continue, going off of logical statistics, or should we, listen to people who have experienced and have gone through these horrible things in order to make the next decisions for America? Within the 1920s, there was a wide variety of controversies and contradictions. Society, in particular, had two big issues: prohibition and the discrimination against women who now had the right to vote due to the 19th Amendment. However, because of this, traditionalists thought that they didn't need the right to vote. They should just go with their traditional roles and go on with their lives. How bad could it have been? Modernists were intrigued as to what women could accomplish. Prohibition in 1920, though established in 1919, with the 18th Amendment, made the consumption, possession, and distribution of alcohol illegal. Modernists thought that this was just another way for the government to try to keep Americans from living their own lives and making their own decisions. Traditionalists, however, thought that it was a better thing to do to keep violence away from the safety of American public and homes. It was also to try to keep people from making rash decisions. Prohibition can be compared to drug legalization in modern-day America. People often tend to argue that, well, drugs probably will not do much good for you. It messes with your head. It messes with your body physically. It's no good for you. It's not healthy. What's the purpose of it? It makes you do things that you're not really supposed to do. But others say, like modernists, believe that it's not the government's right to take away your privilege of doing what you want to do and taking the risks for yourself. And that would be the comparison to modern day debates.
Hello. Today for the one pager, we are talking about the arts and literature in the 1920s. For our first subject about the green borderline is the quote from The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And so the second thing is the picture. This is the book that he wrote that was really popular. And some of the characteristics were the Long Island drama, romance, relationship issues, and such as the characters as Jay Gatsby and Nick Carraway. For the traditional perspective and the modern perspective about the Harlem resistance of right now in the modern world, for the modern Harlem resistance, it's about the black culture, the bringing music and the art into America, and so for in the modern America, we are still using the music and art that they use still today. We're using more from other countries as well.
The entertainment and sports of the 1920s primarily consisted of boxing, baseball, and jazz. First of all, for boxing, there were many new terms to describe the boxing techniques. There were hooks, jabs, blocks, knockouts, and holding. There were also weight classes. In the 1920s began the weight classes in boxing. Boxing in the traditional perspective, the traditionalists favored a social life. They wanted to be at the game watching it with others live, and they wanted the superstars of their time to be World War I heroes rather than boxing superstars. They also favored white superiority and racism. However, for the modern perspective of boxing, modernists favored the increased popularity of boxing with televised matches and boxing superstars. The entertainment industry also profited from this increase in popularity of boxing. African American boxers faced racism, and modernists did not like this. For jazz, the traditional perspective consisted of male supremacy. Many traditionalists disliked race records because they wanted male supremacy and white supremacy to continue. However, for the modern perspective of jazz, record companies profited from race records, so they liked that African Americans were standing up for their rights. Jazz also led to literacy, and women and African Americans stood up for their rights through jazz. This picture right here is of Louis Armstrong. He was a famous jazz musician from New Orleans. He also had the nickname Ambassador Satch, and that was also one of his album names. Hello Dolly was the name of one of his songs. As for baseball, Babe Ruth, this is a picture of him. He was a famous slugger and hit many home runs. He is in the Hall of Fame, and his number during baseball was number 3. Baseball in the 1920s was very different from baseball today. In the 1920s, baseball was a leisure activity for soldiers to put life in perspective. Radios gave game updates, and Babe Ruth was the most famous home run hitter. The Negro League allowed African Americans to play baseball. That was the 1920s. However, today, baseball is a leisure activity from work activities. Many games are televised, including Little League games. Aaron Judge is a big home run hitter today, and all races and ethnicities play in the MLB.
Now, the question I have for Lindsey is, in the 1920s, how did Americans differ on major social and cultural issues?
The biggest difference in the views of Americans on social and cultural issues was their traditional or modern perspective. Many traditionalists were opposed to change because they wanted the United States to continue the pre-existing peace. They thought the issues would destroy the functionality of society and didn't want to fix something that wasn't broken. Modernists, on the other hand, were eager for change. They had stronger opinions about the newer issues present in society and were willing to fight for their beliefs. For example, African Americans stood up for their rights in the Jazz Age, and modernists took a stand to fight with them, changing the way society functioned.